Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Agatha Caraballo from the Department of Public Policy and Administration. Thank you so much for joining us for today's leadership lecture. We're excited to be joined with Manager Jimmy Morales from the City of Miami Beach. I had posted his bio in the link, but I'm going to let him go ahead and tell you about his leadership journey and his experience in public service. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for joining us this afternoon.
Dr. Caraballo, thank you for inviting me to participate. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess we'll keep doing this virtual Zoom or team meetings for as long as necessary, but I think we've all gotten pretty good at it. I was never very much of a technology guy in recent years, but we've all mastered new trades and adapted, which is part of leadership, because one of the things I can tell you in government now for 25 years, expect the unexpected, because it's always happening. So this is just one more challenge you face, and I congratulate all of you for being in the program you're in and at a great university. I always enjoy speaking with students and working with students, and I always look forward to working with FIU. At the city, we've actually worked with President Rosenberg and other leadership to, for example, start an internship program for grad students and undergrads and a variety of disciplines here at the city, many of whom ultimately get hired when they complete. We have, in fact, been working through the Office of Engagement, my good friend Saifi Shuf, and the city and FIU formed a special partnership where we work on a series of projects and issues ranging from resiliency, education, transportation and traffic, historical cataloging. We meet usually quarterly. And one of the wonderful things is that last year, the partnership between the city and FIU was recognized, I think it's by the Southern Conference of Colleges and Universities, as a great community partnership. It received an award. And President Rosenberg even convinced me to become an adjunct professor and teach dual enrollment American history at my old high school, Beach High. So we've got a great relationship here, and I would be remiss if I didn't add, my daughter is a recent graduate of the Chapman School of Hospitality, so I do have an FIU dad sticker on my car. So it's glad to be here virtually. My plan, because I always much more prefer interaction than me just talking, but I do want to spend a little time giving you some observations about leadership, and then really open it up for questions about anything: city, pressing issues in South Florida, leadership issues, the COVID crisis, you name it. But I thought I'd just share a couple things with you. I'm a bit of a unicorn when it comes, I guess, to local government in South Florida. I've been an elected official. I've been a city attorney, actually for two different jurisdictions, and a city manager. I've not been able to find anybody else who's held all three jobs. So I think I'm a bit of a unicorn in that respect. For probably close to 30 years in one capacity or another, even when practicing law on a private basis, I've been involved in local government leadership roles. I've been fortunate during most of that time that local government really is where the action has been. You know, I was one of those government majors in college that thought about going to Washington, like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. But the reality is, over the last 20 or 30 years, given a lot of the stalemate, the partisan stalemate in Washington and a lot of state capitals, it has been local governments, cities across America, that have had to tackle at the front line issues like pandemics, like climate change, like social unrest, so many others. And so I sort of feel like I've been where the action is for the last 30 years, and Miami-Dade County as a whole and all these cities are really a place where a lot of this stuff happens. Now, it was not preordained that I would be a leader of anything when I was growing up. My background, just because I always like to share. I was born and raised on Miami Beach, in fact, local kid, working class family. My mother came from Cuba in 1959. My father came from Puerto Rico, actually in 1947, when nobody really spoke Spanish here. And his name is Policarpio. I lost him a few years ago. He was nicknamed Jimmy because nobody back then could pronounce Policarpio. So that's how I got my name, actually. Neither of my parents ever got past the ninth grade in their respective education. I'm a product of the Miami-Dade public school system. My path to leadership actually, accidentally or whatever, started, I'll tell you, back in 8th grade. This is a little bit like that book, All I Really Need to Know, I learned in kindergarten. I was always a good student. Particularly, I was a math and science guy, math and science. My career ambition in 8th grade was to be a nuclear scientist. Yes, to be a nuclear scientist. Out of the blue, a friend suggested to me that I should run for student council president at Nautilus Junior High School. That's what we called middle schools back then. I thought my friend Lishka was either mocking me or she lost her mind. And she said, "What have you got to lose?" So I decided, let me throw my head in. What the heck? What am I doing? Why not? Now, mind you, I was not one of the cool kids that usually ran student council all the time. In political terminology. I had very low name recognition. This was 1976, the year that Jimmy Carter, an unknown governor from a small state in Georgia, ran for president, and people said, Jimmy who? Well, I was Jimmy who in my school. But it's interesting how it works out. You know, back then they used to do elections the week of. So you couldn't campaign till the Monday, and the election was like Friday morning. And on Thursday, you gave speeches. And for the first 3 days, I was Jimmy who, but worked hard, and my friends, we got posters out and did all that stuff. And then on Thursday, we gave speeches. First time I'd ever really done that. And I was fortunate enough that I received resounding ovations on each of the speeches. And Jimmy who got elected student council president. And it really was a turn in my life. I went from being somebody, you know, thought of working, you know, at a power reactor, and instead, starting in high school, began to pursue things like history and government, ultimately going to law school, thinking that was a great way to get into government and politics and leadership because of the natural connection. But, you know, it was sort of a fluke, one might say. Had my friend Lishka not mentioned it to me, I might be working at a nuclear reactor at Seabrook, New Hampshire or something today. Who knows? But so, yeah, out of that, along the themes of everything you learn, you learn in kindergarten, there were some early lessons I learned then that I candidly have applied throughout my life. One of those is you got to take chances. You have to be willing to risk failure. 8 years ago, I applied to be a city manager in Miami Beach. I'd never been a city manager. I'd been a county commissioner. I have been a city attorney. I obviously have been practicing law for a lot of years in the corporate and transactional world. But I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and fortunately, I was able to do this and feel I've done it well for 8 years. But I took a chance. I tried to step outside of my comfort zone, out of my wheelhouse at times, and use what I'd learned. And one of the best commercials, I like sports analogies, but one of the best commercials I've ever seen to the concept of you can't be afraid to make mistakes or to even fail is a commercial many, many years ago with Michael Jordan. It was a Nike ad that's called Failure. That was the name of the ad. And in it, you see them show footage of him playing poorly in games, missing shots and everything. And then you hear his voice say, and I'm not going to say the whole thing, but it ends by saying, 26 times I've been trusted to take the last shot in the game, and I missed. I have failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. It is because you can't be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid if you're going to do the hard things and to provide the kind of leadership. This can be challenging in the public sector. We are more than the private sector, more than even to some degree the nonprofit world. We're under a significant magnifying glass. When you're spending taxpayer money, when you're dealing with people's lives, with people's livelihoods, it's appropriate that you are under that kind of magnifying glass. And as a result, sometimes a lot of government employees are afraid to take action. My experience has been that not doing something is less likely to get you into trouble than doing something. So one of the things that I've tried to do, not only in my own life, not be afraid to take chances, but part of I think the leadership I've brought to this organization, as well as other involvements I've had, is to encourage your workforce, your management team, your workforce, to not be afraid to make mistakes. As long as you're tackling an issue and you're working in good faith, you're going to sometimes come up short. That's just the way it is. Trial and error, if you think about it, is the oldest and often still the best way people learn. How many times did Thomas Edison not find the light bulb until he finally came across, but he didn't stop? And so one of the things I try to really do is to encourage any group I'm in, whether I'm on the board of directors of a nonprofit, but certainly as city manager of Miami Beach, is when you're facing the kind of tough challenges we face, no one has a playbook on how to deal with climate change and sea level rise. No one has a playbook on how to deal with a pandemic. And we've had two now, Zika and now COVID-19. When there's no playbook, you gotta improvise. And sometimes you're gonna guess right, and sometimes you're gonna guess wrong. But as long as you're doing what you think is right and for the right reasons, I've got their back, and I've found the elected officials will do the same. And so one of the lessons I obviously learned back in 8th grade is, what have I got to lose? You got to take chances if you're going to achieve things. Secondly, and this is so critical, you can't achieve anything without hard work. I'm usually one of the first people in City Hall each morning, pre-COVID. Now it's all virtual still, but pre-COVID, I was usually one of the first people in City Hall and usually one of the last to leave. Leadership by example in that respect is very important. And that's not just about work. It can be about workload. It can be about transparency. It can be about ethics. It can be about customer service. It can be about enthusiasm. It's all set at the top, and so I think for me, it's been very important that people realize I'm working as hard as they are. We're all about transparency. If you don't, practice what you preach, it's not going to last very long in an organization. And so it's putting on yourself the same kind of expectations you have of others. And I preach that to my management team as well. And sure enough, we're a hardworking city, and you got to be. Miami Beach is a city that's open 24/7, and in the course of the last 8 years has faced a lot of literally existential type issues. We got king tides this week, and we talk about, are we going to be around in 100 years? So it takes a lot of hard work. In fact, one of the great myths I think that is out there often, and it's a shame because there's such at times a political rhetoric that's so anti-government. But one of the sort of great urban myths is that government workers are lazy, that government workers are looking at the clock and they're counting their days and weeks until they can retire. I can tell you that's not true. I'm not telling you there aren't some like that. But and I've been in a lot of governments at a lot of different levels. And what I see is mostly a lot of great professionals who care about their job. If they cared about money or something else, they wouldn't be there. They care about their jobs and they work very hard. I saw that at the county in the 8 years I was there, and I've seen it in cities I've worked in, and I've certainly seen it here at the city. I can tell you my team works around the clock and works their butts off every day. Our response to the pandemic is an example of that. From the time it hit, we were doing morning meetings every day, 7 days a week, first with staff, then with commissioners. We had to do our regular work, and we had to then do the work caused by the pandemic. And it's interesting that leadership, in a sense, understands then what is it that motivates employees, because I think sometimes people think, well, it's compensation. Well, it's not, because first of all, the public sector can't pay like the private sector. And it's not necessarily even candidly, performance measurements and dashboards and all that kind of stuff. We've had a lot of consultants come through the city we do try team building exercises and whatnot. And what's come out of that we've learned is there are really two critical reasons why people often choose to go into government work. One is a desire to make a real difference. People talk a lot about how one of the great things, one of the ways to age gracefully is to have a reason to get up in the morning and to do something positive. And that's, I think, for me was, I was a Wall Street lawyer at one point in my life, and I came back home because that wasn't what was, fulfilling my heart. And so I think for people who go into government, it's a desire to make a real difference. The second thing is that they care about the people they're working with. Building an organization, a lot of it is the relationships that you form. And so you build a team of people that care about what they're doing and want to make a real difference. And I think that's why when you see things, perhaps government workers that aren't there, sometimes it's not so much them as it is the organization leadership that has either frustrated them so much that they're just now they are counting the days because they're not getting the fulfillment to make a difference. They've been hamstrung. Political leadership that perhaps doesn't want to make hard decisions, that just wants to play with status quo, or hiring leaders that, quite frankly, don't build culture but destroy it. And that's really, really one of the challenges. Morale is a critical thing in these organizations. I've spent a lot of time trying to work on that. When I got here, had just been a manager, had been fired, a lot of people had left, and it was and there had been ethical issues, and we really worked hard, both by leading on issues of ethics and integrity, but then also by trying to remember that when you work in a city like Miami Beach, which is a place where people come to have a good time, let's figure out ways for our employees to get a little piece of that. So we started doing events for the employees, Halloween things. I went to our first holiday party, and for years the tradition had been that the holiday party in December, employees had to pay a fee to go, and very few went. And I remember our mayor at the time and I agreed, we're going to do this differently next year. We're going to make this a celebration and bring family. And now we have hundreds of people who come with their spouses and just have a wonderful time with that fellowship and camaraderie. And we do a lot of events. This morning, in fact, we had not been together, my management team, at all. And to thank them for their hard work, we actually created a very socially distant event this morning from 8:30 to 10 at the convention center. 100+ members of my management team were there. We had a local comedian come out, and people were so happy to actually see each other in person and not just through a screen. and folks really walked out of there feeling very good. And so, and I find when people are happy about where they are and they feel like they're making a difference, you don't need a dashboard, you don't need a performance measurement. It happens because people take pride in what they're doing and want to do good things. My third lesson that came out of, I guess, that election in 8th grade was that leadership is obviously about communication. I gave I guess, a pretty good speech, and people responded to it, including people who've never met me before. And whether it's oral, whether it's written, whether it's online, social media, even body language, it's about delivering a message. Obviously, you need to know your audience. You need to have the right message for the right issue or for the right times. But it really, it is about communicating. And where I think some leaders fail is there are people who like to hear themselves speak, but they forget that, and I've, this to me has been an important lesson for years. Communication is a two-way street. To be an effective communicator, you must be a good listener. People not only want to know what you have to say, they want to know that you hear them as well. And frankly, if you don't listen, you don't learn. You don't learn what's going on in your organization. You don't learn what's concerning, whether it's the constituents you serve, whether it's the businesses you work with, whether it's your own employees. I've said for years, I don't learn anything when I speak. I only learn when I listen. And it's by listening that you figure out what really is going on. And you earn, I think, the respect of your employees. One of the things I try to do is I send emails on a frequent basis to my employees at holiday time, special events, trying to give them some inspirational message. And it's incredible how well I just started it because I started on day one. And now it's become, if I miss a day, because they enjoy it. I'll just give you an example because you never know what it is. A few years ago, my family and I, as part of a school trip with my son, were in Normandy, where D-Day and everything. And I was so inspired by what happened. I sent sort of a 4 or 5 paragraph email to my employees. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but for those of you who ever saw Private Ryan, you may remember that at the end of the movie, when the Tom Hanks character saves Private Ryan and then is shot while dying, he says to Private Ryan, "Earn it." And the next scene you see is older Private Ryan years later at the cemetery in Normandy and asking his wife if he's been a good man, if he's led a good life. In other words, did he earn it? And so I sent an email, but this was the paragraph. And I say, I think that, and I apologize for taking your time, but I think that it is a fair question for all of us in public service to ask. We are fortunate to serve in a democratic and free nation, which liberties have been secured by men and women that have made the ultimate sacrifice. We need to earn it every day through our professionalism, our integrity, our civility, and our compassion. This is true whether we are processing a building permit application, issuing a moving traffic violation, or rendering outreach to a resident in need. There is no excuse for giving less than 100% or playing close to the edge. The men who scaled the cliffs at Pontotoc in the face of machine gun fire didn't turn around and get back on the boats, nor did they mail it in. They completed their task with honor and dedication. We should do the same. The outpouring I got, and I've sent that, and I think it's just communicating. It's building a sense that there is no closed door on the manager's office that and so I think even when leading your organization, they want to hear from you. They want to know that you're communicating with them. When I took this job, I'll just speak a few more minutes because I'd love to hear from you all and talk with you all. But when I took this job, I'd never been a CEO or CEO really of a large organization. So I tried to read a lot about managerial leadership. Interestingly, and I encourage you all, if you it's been done a few years now, there was a tremendous series back in the about 8 years ago in the New York Times, in the Sunday Times, in the business section. It was called The Corner Office. It appeared on page 2 of the Sunday Times. And, it sort of looked like this. And it was a picture of a CEO. And each week they interviewed a different CEO, private sector, public sector, nonprofit, large corporation. And they would ask them questions about their management style, the hardest part of their job, best advice they ever got. And then I would read these, cut them out, and send them to my management team. And to this day, they'll repeat stuff to me. Like there was one, tell me the problem and 3 ways to solve it. Don't come looking to me for answers. Come to conversation. Give talented people room to bloom. Find the courage to take a scary leap. A company's chemistry starts at the top. Great stuff. And through it, one of the things that really came out, and I think it characterizes my management style, and I know the professor had sent me some questions you all are asking. I'm a huge believer in empowerment. I'm not a micromanager. And quite frankly, I've probably let micromanagers leave because I don't think that's the right approach. I think you have to really empower people. Take, the line that was give talented people room to bloom. If you've hired people that can't do the job, then you failed in your job. But if you do your job right and hire the right people, then let them do their job. And it's so building a culture of people who feel that they have the power and the discretion to make decisions, that you work with them and obviously train and educate, and you're there as a resource, but you encourage, you respect. And I'm a big believer when you do that kind of stuff, the other things take care of themselves, just naturally. Another way to put it was a sage advice I received literally as I was applying for this job. A gentleman who's now one of my assistant city managers at the time was a public works director in Doral, where I was city attorney. And I was always, because I'd been a politician to a degree, our job is to make people feel good about themselves and, get more people to like you and vote for you. I was always concerned, was I too nice a guy to really be a manager? Was I going to be tough enough as a city manager? And do you need to be more like the boss who, you fear in order to get results? And he looked at me and he said, that kind of manager, the one people are afraid of, will get 100% of what he asked for, but never more. And he was so right, because I certainly feel that in the organization that we have here, that I'm proud to lead now, that people go the extra mile. They give 100+%, 7 days a week. And I think it's because of the culture we have built here. My final piece of advice, and then we can start talking about anything you want to talk about, and I really look forward to that, is don't ever abandon your common sense. I think sometimes we get caught up in theories we may have studied, statistics that seem to provide direction in one or another, experts who posit theories, etc. But if something doesn't make sense to you, go with your gut. If something does not smell right, avoid it. Trust your judgment. Biggest mistakes I've probably made is when I went against my better judgment. And I always tell people, management is, it's not easy. Coordinating people, leading people, tackling tough issues. But I also often say, but it ain't rocket science. I mean, a lot of this is just good common sense, and especially in the public sector, where your audience to some degree is also residents and businesses. People aren't necessarily experts who don't have MPAs, people who don't have statistics. They often go by their gut and by common sense. And I think it helps you communicate more clearly with them when you can sort of communicate it in that fashion. And so trust your judgment. I think that's what leaders have to do, because at the end of the day, it's your decision that you make, and you own it, whatever way it goes. So at that point, I can talk forever. I can communicate forever, but let me open it up and for whatever questions you have. I know you had given me, Professor, a few more, but I thought I'd let folks ask, and then we can always work them in.
This is great. A lot of food for thought, and thank you so much for sharing those. For those that are interested, I posted the link to the New York Times corner office that are interested in learning a bit more. I'm going to go to Elaine's question. What do you feel was the worst job decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Worst job decision I ever made. Wow. That's a good one. It has probably been, a couple of hiring decisions that I've made that, and it goes with the gut. Someone who I wasn't thrilled with, and I thought that maybe there were some concerns there, but they looked good on paper, and other people were very excited about them. I had an HR director. I had another department director. I don't want to give names, but where I probably should have gone with my gut. And those are tough, because what happens, the hardest thing, I think, for me, the hardest thing I ever do is firing someone, because you are impacting their life. It's not a decision to take easily. No matter, and even unless you're firing them because they're crook, if they're been corrupt and whatever, then it's easy, because they made a really bad choice in their life. But sometimes, you're just letting someone go because they're not up to snuff. They're not part of the culture. You realize that the organization is suffering because of that. But you also know that you're impacting their life very negatively, and no one obviously likes to do that. And so as a result, I got frustrated because when you make that bad decision and you bring someone on board, sometimes maybe they've moved here from somewhere else, whatever, and then you find out it's not working out, and I should have seen this. Then you got to do that next thing that you really hate to do. And that's probably been some of I've made some poor personnel decisions that I should have known. I should have known. I would say that I'm sure there are other things I just can't think of right now, but those are probably the ones that stand out to me is people I didn't had that gut, but I let somebody else talk me into it.
And like I said, you brought up a good point as far as for your common sense, but also trusting your instinct and your gut, and being able to look back retrospectively. Since we're getting so close to the election, I wanted to bring up Kevin Gonzalez's question, who is, what kind of protocols do you have in place regarding the electoral process during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, keep in mind that the elections are run by the Department of Elections at the county. So we have obviously precincts all over the city, like we have all over the county, including for early voting. We have 2 precincts, one here at City Hall and one at the North Beach Branch Library. So they really they run the centers, but I've seen it over the past year when we've had elections. They have some good protocols in terms of distancing, people wearing masks and other things, cleaning of the facility. Our city clerk is sort of their liaison, and so he works with them. Here at City Hall, the voting usually occurs at our community room on the first floor, and we put up the signs for distancing and whatnot. It's going to be very interesting because if you saw this week, the states that opened up already, Georgia and Texas come to mind, you've seen huge lines at the precinct. So just before this Zoom call, I was on with my executive team, my direct reports, and one of the things we want to talk about is protocols for the election, because if we have huge lines out here, people are going to be out there potentially 2 or 3 hours past closing time, because they keep the precinct open if there are people in line. So we're going to have security out there and whatnot. So it's this is going to be a challenging year. This has been that year where everything we do has a COVID overlay. The most challenging of those actually was emergency response. What happens if a hurricane hits, and what do you do with shelters? What do you do with your response teams and your landing teams? How do you deal with that? And so we've all our playbooks have had to have the COVID overlay or the COVID chapter added to them.
I'm glad that you had mentioned about the elections are managed obviously by the county. If you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about the relationships for intergovernmental relationships between the county as a municipality and as kind of a keystone municipality within Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, Florida's a little different than a lot of other states, and here the county-city relationships. So Miami-Dade, there are 67 counties in the state of Florida, obviously. Miami-Dade County is the largest, I think budget-wise, with a budget of about $9 billion, larger than I think 16 or 17 states. It is the 7th largest local government, I think, the last time I looked, in the United States. But within Miami-Dade County, there are, I've lost count, over 30 cities, municipalities, and whether they're called a town or the village of, they're all considered municipal corporations under Florida law. The county has a broad range, particularly being a charter county that we are, of authority. They run pretty much almost anything you can think of: airport, seaport, public hospital, public transportation. Now within the cities, the incorporated cities do have control over the local stuff, your parks, your public works, your code enforcement. Almost every city has their own police department. Only 5 cities have their own fire department: Miami Beach, Miami, Hialeah, Coral Gables, and Key Biscayne. Everyone else, the county is the fire department. They're the public library system. So, and even in areas like zoning or other stuff, or your local roads, the county has an overlay of authority. So if we want to put up a 4-way stop sign in Miami Beach, we need county approval as well as our city commission approval. So there is a tremendous amount of interaction. And by the way, those aren't the only jurisdictions, because you then have FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, has jurisdictions on certain roads. On the beaches, you've got the Army Corps of Engineers and the Fish and Wildlife. There's a multiplicity of jurisdictions that impact us. So you really do have to have a strong working relationship. One of the, I think the things that's helped me be successful here is because I'd had 8 years at the county, I had a lot of relationships there. We were able to work through a lot of issues. One of the things I'm proud of stuff, for example, is we built this $620 million convention center. A third of that money is county money. And I stood before that county commission for 2 hours fighting hard to get that dollars for this beautiful building. And those relationships are very important. We don't always agree, and there's sometimes tension between the counties and the cities, but those are very important relationships at the local level. So it's a good question.
I wanted to go also to a question that was also posted in one of the courses, talking about, conflicting interests. How, as a manager, do you balance the interests of the different constituents, the residents, the businesses, and the the visitors?
Yeah. A couple of different ways to approach that. Number one, there is a running current in Miami Beach history since, I can remember, is the struggle between quality of life for residents and economic development and tourism. And it is a battle that you see ebb and flow. We had too much development, and then the pendulum swings back, and then it's shut down everything, and it goes back and forth in that struggle. It wasn't so bad when I was growing up on Miami Beach, because back then, Miami Beach was much more affordable in terms of living. And so a lot of workforce lived on the beach in the hospitality sector. My father came to Miami Beach in 1947 to work as a waiter in the hotels, and was a waiter till 1972. So a lot of us had a kinship to tourism, because we knew that's what put bread on our table and a roof over our head, and so there was perhaps a bit more synergy. We knew the tourists, could be a little, inconvenient, but we were glad they were here because, our dads and moms were making money. Fast forward today, Miami Beach real estate is extremely expensive. Most of your hospitality workforce does not live on the island anymore. And you've had folks who've moved here or have second or third homes, or have retired here from successful, careers in other places, and have no particular affinity to the hospitality industry and see it purely as an inconvenience, particularly since it's exploded. I mean, we're talking pre-COVID, obviously, not too many people are coming now, but you're talking 12 million visitors a year to the beach, 9 million of which probably stay on the beach. It's not maybe as bad as like Venice or Barcelona, but we're like close. We get, overrun just by sheer numbers of people here, traffic, the congestion. Some of our visitors aren't necessarily friendly and, engage in activities that folks don't like, but it's just a lot. And the trash and all that stuff that's generated. So there is a worse tension today, I would say, between those two. And it's a tough balance, because one of the things that tourism does do for us is we get a significant resort tax. I mean, $70 million plus a year in resort taxes. We get huge parking revenues. And those dollars, again, in the tens of millions historically, and those dollars are used to some degree to subsidize the quality of life, because a lot of the cultural activities here, we subsidize that money. The activities on the beach are beautiful, iconic lifeguard stands. There's a lot of park programming and things like that that are in fact available to the residents and are part of the things they love about Miami Beach, but in fact are heavily subsidized by tourist dollars. So it's that's a tough balance to strike there, and it's never perfect. There's never the perfect balance. It goes back and forth a little bit, and we're going through it now. We've had some significant development projects that have been recently approved, and you're starting to hear people get worried about, are we going too far in that regard? Oop. Did I lose? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm going to Jacob Marrero Torres's question in the chat was, how difficult has execution in government been for you over the years? Are there any factors that may have helped it or affected your strategic execution?
Look, I think to technology has helped a lot. I mean, the truth is, I can run the city from this. We've learned that obviously during COVID. The fact that because of technology, we can have virtual community meetings. We can have quasi-judicial zoning meetings and land use meetings. So technology has obviously made a huge difference in our ability to respond more quickly to issues and problems. And so I think from that perspective, it's facilitated it. And clearly, technology in addressing, issues, whether, sea level rise, better technology, beach renourishment. I mean, you name it. There are things that didn't exist 20, 30, 40 years ago that we can do now. And obviously the ability to communicate. I mean, the ability to touch more people. I mean, the traditional town hall meeting that might have 50 people at it because that's the only ones who could make it. People got kids at home, they getting home from work, whatever. Now, the ability to access people through social media, the ability to do, virtual town hall meetings. I think we're going to forever probably now do a combined hybrid version, which will increase the more and more people that can participate. So I think all that's been positive. The flip side is I think, social media has made messaging in certain respects, however, more difficult because I think the tone of public discourse, political and otherwise, people are willing to write in an email or a post what they wouldn't look at you in the eye and say. I think we can all attest to that. Also, the speed with which information gets disseminated, you're often, before you can correct the record, it's already exploded. Something goes viral and it might not even be true. I remember one day I was flooded with emails about that we were turning over North Shore Open Space Park, beautiful park that runs from 79th to 87 on the beach, that we were turning it over to a private developer for their private use. And it all came because somebody asked a security guard at the park, they saw that there was some construction going on, and the guard supposedly said, "Oh yeah, this is for a private developer, it's going to be his park." And that went viral, and all of a sudden it's like, and we were fighting false information all the time. And that is challenging because, look, a lot of the issues we deal with are challenging and difficult issues. And it sometimes takes time to educate, time to inform, to get the information out there. And people now are, what can I do in a 60-second soundbite or 10-second soundbite, or what fits into an Instagram, and a lot of these issues, it's easier to be negative in a short message. It's harder to inform and educate, particularly with the complicated issues like, an issue about a stormwater pump in a neighborhood, or a traffic improvement project here, or the information about the pandemic and health issues. It's always easy to attack in a negative way quickly. It's a lot harder to get the information out there. And I think that has, made it challenging because part of governing is informing and educating. And so as a result, we do a lot more of it. We have to ourselves become agile in getting out that information. But we find ourselves finding often a lot of false information about stuff. And that goes viral. And I can't tell you that the questions I've been, why are you giving that away? Or why have you fired these 100 people? I didn't fire 100 people. I don't know, as you know, there's a lot of that false information on social media and the internet, and it's unfortunate.
That's a great point. And, as we mentioned with the virtual commission meetings now in city councils, there's more opportunity for those to, to participate and maybe perhaps hear it firsthand. I'm going to go to Amanda Knapp's question. She says, as a Miami Beach resident for over 10 years, she has seen positive changes in flooding issues thanks to the current Rising Above program. And how does Miami Beach plan to address these issues in the decades to come? And I guess as part of the balancing the long-term and the short-term needs of the community.
Yeah, it is. There's no question that we're an island that is, most of the island is, 3 feet or less above the sea level, or 4 feet, or basically, when you look at all the projections, and we work with the best science. We're a part of the South Florida Compact, and we used their projections. In fact, they had a meeting this week, and they actually highlighted some of the stuff we're doing. You've got to raise the city. There's just no two ways about it. You have to elevate our roads. Properties are going to have to elevate. It's an expensive and cumbersome process. It's not necessarily as aesthetically pleasing as you'd like it to always be. And the question then becomes, how quickly do we need to do it? What's that transition phase? We've done it in some areas, and if anyone's been to the Sunset Harbor neighborhood, for example, you'll see an area that literally flooded. In 2013, I remember in the fall, the then candidate for mayor who became mayor, Philip Levine, campaigned kayaking down Purdy Avenue with his dog in his kayak because the water was that high on a king tide. Now, fast forward, we've done tremendous work there. Since then, and since we finished our work about 4 years ago, there have, I think, been over 100 tides higher than that one. And yet we haven't had flooding in Purdy. So we know, or in Sunset Harbor. So we know we can do it, but it is expensive. Neighbors don't like their areas to be ripped up, and we're getting some pushback. The above ground panels are not aesthetically pleasing, but they got to be above ground, and they got to be about 5 to 10 feet above ground so they can be above the flooding. We're going to try to be aesthetic and whatnot, but this is the transition phase now is hard because people don't see the urgency. They think it's 30 years from now, 40 years from now. First of all, a blink of an eye before, our kids, my kids today are going to see this stuff. And certainly if I ever have grandkids, they'll definitely see this. And generally, if you think about infrastructure, you got to make decisions today that impact 30, 40 years from now, because by the time you get to that point and the water is up, it's too late. I don't know if some of you have seen articles in Miami Herald about neighborhoods in the Keys, in Key Largo. People can't get out of their neighborhood because the water is above, and they can't get out of their neighborhood at king tides. And the frequency of king tides is going to continue to grow, and the height of those tides until, over as the years go by. So we have a plan. It's expensive. It involves a combination of gray infrastructure and blue-green. But at the end of the day, the critical element is we have to elevate. And I use the example, if you've ever been to like a Rome, you see like layer of civilizations, right? I mean, Rome has built upon itself. And that, to some degree, that's what we're probably going to need to do to survive. We're going to elevate the island. We're going to have to do higher seawalls. We're going to have to do, we've done already, backflow preventers so the water doesn't come up the outfalls into the bay. Some cities are talking about gates. Venice just installed gates that have helped tremendously. It's going to be an infrastructure laid. Now, long term, we've also got to change our behavior. We've got to deal with greenhouse gases. We've got to do a lot of these issues because and my message, because we try to be non-political about it in the following sense. As a manager of Miami Beach, I don't care what's causing it. I don't care if you don't believe in climate change. I don't care if you think it's the Gulf of Stream is slowing down. Here's my reality. It's flooding. It didn't flood like that. I grew up on my beach. The streets did not flood like that. So I've got to deal with that issue. So let's not, and we've been very successful dealing with the state, for example, Florida Department of Transportation and others, by saying, we're not here to shout at you about whether you want to use the word climate change. Help us deal with flooding. We got a problem, and it's affecting property values. In fact, Monday, you may have seen the University of Pennsylvania released, the Wharton School, a study about how already we're seeing very negative impacts on real estate prices in South Florida for the low-lying areas. So it's a $1 issue today, not just 30 years from now.
No, those are great points. One thing I would like you just to kind of conclude with is, since these are the next generation, some already working in public service, others just starting out, what advice would you give to those that are embarking on a public service career and how to be successful?
Well, some of the things I've said already are advice I give, but there's one advice. My father, who what's really funny, I told you my father was a waiter and worked as a custodian, and I don't know if this appears. Can you read this? Or is it reversed? This was my father's quote to me growing up, which I'll read for those who can. Be nice to the people you meet on your way up, because you meet the same people on your way down. In life, we're all going to go up and down. I was a county commissioner. I ran for mayor. I lost. I was out of government for a while. I was a city attorney. I'm here. And you never know where your travels will take you. But I think if you treat people with respect, you'll be, I go back to the county, and because as a commissioner, I treated the employees with respect. People always, oh, Mr. Commissioner, can I help you in any way? You know, whatever. Oh, we miss you. You know, if you, so I think treat people with respect. And you know, I the old saying, you'll get more than 100%. But again, life is, you never know where your path will lead you. And so that's one thing I'd say is treat everybody like, you know, they're a king, or treat them the way you'd want to be treated. Secondly, sort of similar to not being afraid to take chances. I'm a big believer. Life is not a destination; it's a journey, and it's hard. You know, you may have your eyes set on this, and for me, you know, my first goal was politics, and I ran for county mayor. I had ambitions beyond that, and then, you know, I got detoured, and I found just you know, I started doing some city attorney work because I was an attorney, so it was a natural. And then this fell in my lap, and you know, I've loved what I've been doing the last 8 years. I'm leaving here in about 4 months to explore some other opportunities, and stay tuned. But so don't, you know, I think you have to be adaptable. You know, you're going to get curves in life, and you know, one window closes, another window opens, and you just need to be flexible enough, not afraid to make change, because that's what, you know, change is constant. So don't be afraid of it. Embrace it if you have to, but things are not always going to go your way, and that's okay. There's that old saying: failing is not in falling down; failing is in not getting up again. Look, we had probably one of my hardest moments here was we had $3.7 million stolen out of our general fund account through some electronic fraud stuff, and that was a tough moment. I thought I was probably going to get fired. Somebody's head's got to roll. But what I did at least is I said, I'm going to get this money back. I'm going to do everything I can. And working with our law department, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and my CFO, we got back 99% of that money without having to file a single lawsuit and spend a single penny on a lawyer. And so I fell down, but we got up. And you know, I'm here, I think 4 years later still. So and bad stuff's going to happen. Now, that's the thing about government. You know, when I first got elected, I remember to the county commission, I met with the then county manager, Armando Vidal, and he said the problem he goes with these government jobs, particularly those of you who want to be leaders, is you're often reacting. You know, I'm lucky if I get to half the things I want to do today, because invariably something has happened. You know, there's a breakdown on a major road, and all of a sudden, or you know, a building collapses like it did last year on Collins Avenue. It's my day. Or a virus arrives on our shore, and there's my rest of my year. I mean, it's so you gotta sort of go with the punches, because on any given day, and stuff happens. You know, little boy Elian floats onto the shores of Miami, and all of a sudden it throws the whole community upside down. And that's our business in government. You know, that is our business. We don't make, you know, a product that we can focus on just making that product. You're dealing with a wide variety of the services and issues, from providing public safety to being the regulatory agency, to all kinds of things. And invariably, something happens. It happens daily. Sometimes it's a little sometimes it's a big it, but it happens, and you need to be flexible. The other thing I think is, and a little related to micromanagement, there are so many balls we all have in the air. I mean, you sort of got to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. Know enough, because you know, I mean, we're running a corporation. You know, I'm running a corporation, so I have everything from litigation, buying and selling real estate, contracts, lawsuits. I mean, it's all part of my HR, hiring and firing, you just sort of realize you can't get nervous about it. I know. I mean, I'm not saying you need to master every ball in the air, but at some point, just know where they are, because it is just a way of life. And surround yourself with talented people. Don't be afraid of that. Some people may not like to hire people that they think are smarter or better. I'm happy to, because that really is what makes it. It's I rely heavily. I empower and delegate, because I can't do it all, especially in an organization of 2,000 people. So I have to do that. And so it's surrounding yourself with really talented people. Let them do their job, and life's a lot easier. Doesn't mean the job is going to be easy. It's still going to be a lot of hard work, but at least you're getting things done as a team. So.
No, those are all great points. You know, you're dealing with the predictable and the unpredictable all at the same time, expecting the unexpected and just rolling with
Yep.
the punches. You know, we really appreciate you just taking your time to share your expertise with us and your time. I'm really excited to see what your next chapter
Well,
leads you.
thank you. My pleasure. And if any, anyone ever wants to reach out, please. We love working with FIU, and if some of you interested in internships, I don't know what we're doing now. I guess it's all virtual, but through the Office of Engagement, I think you can reach out, and we'd be happy once we're back, back in our offices at some point to continue to host great FIU students.
That's fantastic. On a related note, I was just on a panel right before this about externships and virtual internship opportunities. And one thing that we started doing was partner with ICMA at FIU to do a mentoring program internship with the credentialed managers as part of their professional development to be able to
Wonderful.
credit. So definitely we'll be reaching out again, and really
Absolutely.
hope that you'll be willing to share your time. And one thing I would like to tell the students is, as you know, Manager Morales says, don't be afraid to take a leap of faith to reach out. It takes a little bit of initiative, but there might be an amazing opportunity for you, internships. But again, it's just kind of putting yourself out there and stepping up. And we really look forward to working with you again. And thank you again.
Everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend. For those of you that are interested in staying on, I have Melissa Padron who's going to talk about voter registration. Make sure you have all made a plan, and if you'd like, we'll share some information. Hello, Melissa.
Hi, thank you everyone who's still staying. I appreciate it. That was a great panel.